In an isolated mansion, a 5-year-old girl, sick and exhausted, is forced by her own father to clean every corner of the huge mansion every day without rest or affection. One day, while crying alone, the purebred white horse that belongs to the rich man observes everything through the window and feels that something is very wrong. The animal realizes that the girl's situation is critical. Due to the inhumane conditions in which the little one found herself, she was becoming increasingly ill. On a stormy night, the girl, locked in a room and moaning with fever, cannot resist and faints. The horse sees everything through the window, and what he does in the following minutes is so risky and tense that it defies all understanding. Before we begin, if you, like us, love animals, subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss any exciting stories. Thank you. Now, let's get back to our story. The sun had barely risen when the first sobs echoed through the halls of the imposing Rosewood Manor. Sophia, a girl of only 5, was already on her feet, her small fingers gripping tightly to the handle of a broom almost taller than herself. Her brown hair, tied in a lopsided ponytail, framed a pale face marked by premature dark circles. The cough that had plagued her for days seemed to worsen each morning. From the top of the marble staircase, Edward Montgomery, the wealthiest man in the county, observed his daughter with cold eyes. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, he consulted his gold watch for the 3rd time in less than 5 minutes. "Sophia!" His voice thundered through the room, making the little girl flinch. "You still haven't finished sweeping the entrance hall. You know what happens when you don't complete your chores on time." The little girl quickened her movements, ignoring the dizziness her fever caused. Her hands trembled as she tried to manage the broom, too heavy for her frail body. A fresh coughing fit made her stop momentarily, and a single tear trickled down her freckled cheek. "I don't want your tears staining my freshly waxed floor," Edward warned, descending a few steps. "Finish this quickly and then head to the library. The shelves need dusting before my meeting with the investors." Sophia nodded silently, swallowing her sobs. Through the enormous windows of the manor, she could see the first rays of sunlight touching the verdant fields that stretched to the horizon. A movement caught her attention. Prince, her father's majestic white horse, was grazing peacefully near the house. The animal lifted its head, as if sensing the girl's gaze. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Sophia felt a wave of comforting warmth in her chest. It was as if, in that fleeting instant, an invisible connection had been established between two lonely souls. "Sophia!" Edward's cutting voice brought her back to reality. "Stop dawdling and finish your tasks, or would you prefer to spend the night in the back room again?" The back room. Just the thought of that dark, cold, windowless cubbyhole where she was locked as punishment sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. Her back still ached from the last time she'd slept on the hard floor of that place, 3 days ago, when she hadn't managed to clean all the manor's windows. Maria, the oldest cook in the house, hurried through the hall, carrying a tray with Edward's breakfast. Her eyes met Sophia's for a moment, filled with restrained pity. The woman wanted to help, as she had tried to intervene many times, but Edward's threats were clear. Any employee who interfered would be immediately fired. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and buttered toast made Sophia's stomach rumble. Her last meal had been a piece of stale bread the previous night, secretly given by Maria when Edward had already retired to his chambers. As she swept, Sophia vaguely recalled the face of her mother Laura, one of the former maids at the manor. Her memories were fragmented, more sensations than clear images, the warmth of a hug, a whispered lullaby, the soft scent of lavender. Laura had left when Sophia was only 2, taken by an illness Edward had refused to treat adequately. A distant whinny caught her attention again. Prince was still near the window, his snow-white coat gleaming in the morning sun. The horse, Gift from a prominent local rancher was Edward's pride, though the animal never showed the same enthusiasm for its owner as it did for the stable hands. Sophia finished sweeping the hall, her arms aching from the effort. Her head throbbed, and her throat burned more and more. She knew she should head to the library immediately, but her eyes remained fixed on Prince. The horse now walked slowly towards the nearest window, as if wanting to get closer to her. Edward descended the last step of the staircase, his Italian, leather shoes echoing on the impeccable floor. He stopped beside Sophia, critically analyzing the girl's work. "Acceptable," he muttered, without any trace of approval in his voice. "Now go to the library, and remember, if I find a single speck of dust on the shelves when I return, you know what your punishment will be." Sophia gripped the broom tighter, trying to control the tremor in her hands. As she headed to the library, she cast one last look at Prince. The horse had reached the window and was watching her intently, as if it could sense her anguish. In that moment, something subtly shifted in the air of Rosewood Manor. It was as if an old magic had begun to awaken, weaving the first threads of a story that would forever change the life of a little girl and the majestic white horse that watched her through the glass. Sophia entered the library with hesitant steps, carrying her small cleaning bucket. The scent of old books and polished wood filled the air, and the golden morning light filtered through the red velvet curtains, creating dancing shadows on the shelves that rose to the ceiling. In other times, this had been her favorite place in the manor. Before Edward forbade her from touching the books, Sophia used to sit hidden among the shelves, flipping through illustrated volumes and dreaming of distant worlds. Now, her fingers could only touch the spines of the books to remove dust, a constant reminder of her position in the house. She climbed the wooden ladder carefully, balancing the duster. Her cough had worsened, and each breath caused a pang in her chest. From the top of the ladder, she could see through the library's side window where Prince still remained, as if standing guard. A noise at the door made Sophia turn, startled, almost losing her balance. It was Helen, the head housekeeper, a stern-faced woman who had arrived at the manor shortly after Laura's death. "Your father ordered me to supervise your work today," she announced, adjusting her gold-rimmed glasses. "The investors are very important people, and everything needs to be perfect." Sophia nodded, trying to suppress a coughing fit. Helen approached, and for a moment, her expression softened. "Child, that cough sounds terrible," she murmured, more to herself than to Sophia. Then, as if remembering her role, she straightened her posture. "Continue your work. The sooner you finish, the sooner you can rest." The hours dragged on as Sophia meticulously cleaned each shelf. Her arms ached, and the fever seemed to increase with each minute. Helen remained seated in a nearby armchair, dividing her attention between her needlepoint and the girl's work. Around noon, a familiar sound came through the slightly open window. Prince's soft whinny. Sophia discreetly looked out and saw the horse nuzzling the glass, fogging it with his breath. It was the first time the animal had come so close to the library. Helen also noticed the horse's unusual behavior. "Strange," she commented, frowning. "Prince has never been one to come so close to the house. Your father won't like this at all." Sophia felt a lump in her throat. The last thing she wanted was to cause trouble for Prince. The horse, however, seemed determined to stay there, his dark eyes fixed on her with an almost human intensity. Another coughing fit shook Sophia's body, causing her to drop the duster. Helen quickly stood up, retrieving the object. "Here," she said, handing back the duster and, surprisingly, also offering a clean handkerchief. "Use this. We can't have you contaminating your father's books." The gesture, though practical, was the first sign of consideration Sophia had received that day. Her hands trembled as she accepted the handkerchief, and for a moment, her eyes filled with tears. "No crying," Helen warned, but her voice was less harsh. "Finish the last shelf. The investors arrive in an hour." Sophia resumed her work, aware of Prince's gaze following her every move. It was as if the horse understood her pain, her loneliness. A few times, when her cough forced her to stop, she could swear she heard a soft whinny of concern. Helen consulted her wristwatch and sighed. "I'm going to the kitchen to check on the lunch preparations. Finish this in 15 minutes, or your father—" She didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. Sophia knew the consequences well. As soon as Helen left, Sophia approached the window. Prince immediately pressed his muzzle against the glass, leaving a damp mark. It was the first time they had been so close. Through the glass, Sophia could see the details of his snow-white coat, the gentle eyes that seemed to hold an ancient wisdom. "Hi, Prince," she whispered, her voice hoarse from coughing. The horse responded with a soft nod, as if greeting her. For a brief moment, Sophia forgot her exhaustion, her illness, her fear. There was something in that animal's gaze that made her feel less alone. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her quickly return to work. Helen returned, accompanied by the butler who announced the early arrival of the investors. Sophia hurried to finish the last shelf, her heart racing. Before leaving the library, she cast one last look at Prince. The horse remained there, his presence a silent promise that something was about to change at Rosewood Manor. Dusk was falling over Rosewood Manor as the first dark clouds began to form on the horizon. Sophia, now in the sunroom, struggled against exhaustion as she cleaned the enormous panes of glass. Her movements were increasingly slow, hampered by the unrelenting fever. The meeting with the investors had ended a short while ago, and Edward was in a good mood, which meant that maybe, just maybe, Sophia could sleep in her own little room tonight instead of the dreaded back room. Still, every task had to be executed perfectly. Outside, Prince had moved to accompany her in her new location. The horse seemed restless, alternating between grazing the nearby grass and returning to watch her through the glass. His hooves nervously tapped the ground each time Sophia coughed or stumbled. Maria, the cook, crossed the sunroom carrying an empty tray. Seeing Sophia shivering with fever as she tried to reach a particularly difficult smudge high on the window pane, the old woman couldn't restrain herself. "Good heavens, child," she whispered, placing the tray on a decorative table. "You're burning up with fever." Her wrinkled hands touched Sophia's forehead with a motherly gentleness. "This can't go on like this." "I'm fine, Ms. Maria," Sophia replied automatically, her words punctuated by another coughing fit. "I just need to finish the windows before—" "Father, your father!" Maria interrupted, indignation showing in her usually controlled voice. "Edward Montgomery may be the richest man in this town, but what he's doing—" She stopped herself as she heard approaching footsteps. Helen entered the sunroom, her eyebrows raised at seeing Maria with the girl. "Is there a problem here?" Maria quickly composed herself. "None at all. Just checking that the little one wasn't smudging the windows instead of cleaning them." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. A distant clap of thunder announced the approaching storm. Prince whinnied outside, more agitated than ever. Helen cast a worried glance at the darkening sky. "Sophia, finish this quickly. We need to close all the windows before the rain starts." Maria hesitated before leaving, her eyes meeting Helen's in a silent plea. The housekeeper nodded imperceptibly, a tacit agreement forming between the two women. Sophia continued her work, each movement requiring more effort than the last. Her vision was starting to blur, and cold sweat trickled down her forehead. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, creating dark spots on Prince's white coat, who refused to seek shelter. Helen watched the scene for a few moments before making a decision. "Sophia," she called, her voice softer than usual. "Go to the kitchen and ask Maria for a new cloth." This one is too wet for the glass. Sophia nodded, grateful for the brief respite. As she passed through the door leading to the kitchen, she could hear Helen muttering something about not being able to stand watching this anymore, and that child will die if this continues. In the kitchen, Maria was waiting for her with a glass of water and a piece of cake hidden under a napkin. "Eat quickly, little one," she instructed, checking that no one was around. "And take this too." She discreetly slipped a fever tablet into Sophia's hand. As Sophia ate gratefully, the thunder drew closer. The rain was now falling heavily, and through the kitchen window she could see Prince still standing in the same spot, his white silhouette almost ghostly against the dark sky. "That horse," Maria commented, following Sophia's gaze. "I've never seen him act like this before. It's as if he's protecting you." Sophia swallowed the last piece of cake, feeling a little better with the food and medicine. "He's my friend," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Maria smiled sadly. "Your mother also had a special way with animals," she revealed, her eyes distant with the memory. "Laura always said they could see the truth in our souls." Another clap of thunder, closer this time, made the manor tremble. Helen appeared at the kitchen door, her face a mask of concern. "Sophia, your father is calling. He wants you to clean his office before you retire for the night." Sophia's heart sank. Edward's office was the most frightening room in the manor, filled with hunting trophies and austere portraits of ancestors. And she always had the feeling that all those eyes were watching her, judging her every move. As she left the kitchen, Sophia cast a final glance at Prince through the window. The horse remained in the rain, his white coat now completely soaked. His eyes met hers, and at that moment a bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating the entire garden. For an instant, it seemed to Sophia that there was something more in the animal's eyes, a determination, a promise. The storm was just beginning, and with it, a series of events that no one in Rosewood Manor could foresee. Edward Montgomery's office was a monument to ostentation. Heavy, dark green velvet curtains framed the floor-to-ceiling windows, while taxidermied heads of exotic animals adorned the mahogany-paneled walls. The storm raging outside made the room even gloomier, with occasional lightning flashes casting distorted shadows in the corners. Sophia entered carrying her bucket and cleaning cloths, trying not to tremble. The medicine Maria had given her had slightly reduced the fever, but her throat still burned, and each breath was an effort. Edward was seated in his imposing leather chair, examining some documents under the light of the bronze desk lamp. "Start with the shelves," he ordered without looking up, "and don't drop anything this time." The warning made Sophia recall the previous week, when her trembling hands had knocked over a small crystal elephant. The object hadn't broken, but the punishment had been severe, an entire night in the back room without dinner. Sophia began her work methodically, as Helen had taught her, top to bottom, left to right, always paying extra attention to the corners where dust tended to accumulate. Through the nearest window, she could see Prince, still faithfully stationed. In the rain, his white coat gleaming with each lightning flash. "That horse is acting strangely," Edward commented suddenly, following his daughter's gaze. "Perhaps it's time to sell him. The senator's son has shown interest." Sophia's heart clenched in her chest. The thought of losing her only friend made her eyes fill with tears, which she quickly tried to hide by lowering her head. "Sensitive, like your mother," Edward muttered, his tone laced with contempt. Laura also cried over anything. In the end, it didn't help her much, did it? Sophia continued cleaning, pretending not to hear, but each of her father's words was like a small dagger in her heart. A coughing fit shook her, making her lose her balance momentarily. "Don't you dare get sick," Edward warned, his voice sharp. "I'm not going to waste money on doctors for you. It was a sufficient waste when your mother fell ill." Outside, Prince whinnied loudly, as if protesting the cruel words. The sound seemed to irritate Edward, who stood up abruptly. "This animal needs some discipline," he declared, heading towards the door. "I'll have George put him in the stable, by force if necessary." "Please don't," Sophia whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Edward stopped, turning slowly towards her. "What did you say?" Sophia swallowed hard, her heart pounding. It's just that he might get hurt in the storm," she tried to explain, her voice trembling. The sound of Edward's hand slamming on the desk echoed like thunder. "You have no right to an opinion in this house," he bellowed. "Your only function is to clean, and even that you can barely do right." At that moment, Helen hurried into the office. "Mr. Montgomery," she called, her voice tense. "Urgent call from the senator." Edward adjusted his tie, instantly composing himself. "See to it that she finishes everything here," he ordered the housekeeper before leaving, "and have George take care of that horse." As soon as Edward left the room, Helen quickly approached Sophia. "There's no phone call," she whispered. "But I needed to get your father out of here. You're burning with fever, child." Sophia shook her head, determined. "I need to finish cleaning," she insisted, though her legs could barely support her. "Stubborn, like your mother," Helen sighed, a flicker of affection in her usually stern eyes. Laura also never admitted when she needed help. Another flash of lightning illuminated the office, followed by the sound of hooves pounding hard on the ground. Prince was becoming increasingly agitated, as if he sensed something. "That horse," Helen murmured, watching the animal through the window. "There's something different about him. It's as if—" She was interrupted by George, the stable hand, who appeared drenched at the door. "Miss Helen, I can't get Prince into the stable. He's never acted like this before. It's like he's protecting something." Helen looked from George to Sophia, then to the horse, a sudden understanding dawning in her eyes. "Or someone," she completed softly. Sophia continued her work, each movement more difficult than the last. Her vision was beginning to darken at the edges, but she knew she couldn't stop. The sound of the rain mingled with the echo of Prince's hooves, creating a strange melody that seemed to herald something important. The night was just beginning at Rosewood Manor, and with it a sequence of events that would forever change the fate of a little girl and her unlikely protector. The kitchen at Rosewood Manor was the only place where the warmth felt genuine. On that stormy night, as Sophia finished polishing the last of the day's silverware, Maria and Helen conversed in worried whispers near the wood-burning stove. The smell of hot soup filled the air, mingling with the aroma of fresh bread still left over from dinner. "We can't stand by any longer," Maria declared, her wrinkled hands nervously clutching her apron. "Did you see how she is? The fever is only getting worse, and that cough. It reminds me so much of Laura's last days." Helen adjusted her glasses, a gesture she always made when she was particularly disturbed. "Edward will never allow us to call a doctor. You remember what happened the last time we tried to intervene?" The thunder that reverberated through the manor seemed to emphasize the gravity of the situation. Sophia, who could barely hold the silver polishing cloth in her trembling hands, stifled another coughing fit. "Come here, little one," Maria called, unable to continue watching the girl's suffering. Sophia approached hesitantly, her steps unsteady. The cook helped her sit on a bench near the stove, wrapping her thin shoulders in an old shawl. George told me something interesting," Helen commented, lowering her voice even further. "It seems the town veterinarian, Dr. Michael, isn't just an animal specialist. Before moving here, he was a physician in Chicago. He changed professions after he lost his wife." Maria raised her eyebrows, understanding immediately. "And Edward never knew this?" "No. To him, Dr. Michael is just the vet who takes care of his precious horses." A sharp whinny cut through the night, making all three of them jump. Prince, still refusing to enter the stable, was now banging his hooves against the back kitchen door. "This horse," Helen murmured, approaching the window. "It's as if he knows." Sophia tried to stand up, worried about Prince, but her legs gave way. Maria caught her just in time, preventing her from falling. Good Lord, she's burning with fever. At that moment, George entered through the back door, bringing with him a gust of wind and rain. "Excuse me," he said, removing his soaked hat, "but I can't get Prince to go in. He's never acted like this before. He's getting more and more agitated." Helen exchanged a significant look with Maria. "George," she called, her voice taking on a decisive tone. "How long do you think it would take to get to Dr. Michael's house, even with this storm?" The stable hand scratched his chin, thoughtful. "On horseback? About 20 minutes, maybe, by the dirt road that cuts through the pastures." "And Edward, where is he?" Maria asked, adjusting the shawl better on Sophia's shoulders. "Locked in. His office with a bottle of whiskey," George replied. "After that argument with the senator on the phone, I doubt he'll come out of there any time soon." Helen took a deep breath, making a decision. "George, I need you to—" She was interrupted by a dull thud. Sophia had fainted, sliding from the bench straight onto the kitchen floor. Maria let out a muffled exclamation, rushing to help the girl. "Good heavens!" George exclaimed, helping to lift Sophia. Her small body was as light as a feather, and her skin burned like embers. Outside, Prince began to whinny frantically, his hooves striking the door with even more force. "Enough hesitating," Helen declared, her voice trembling slightly. "George, you go to Dr. Michael right now. Tell him it's an emergency with one of the horses. He'll come, I'm sure." "But if the boss finds out," George began, hesitant. "If we do nothing," Maria interrupted, her hands stroking Sophia's damp hair, "we'll have another death on our consciences. I can't go through that again, not after Laura." A particularly strong flash of lightning illuminated the kitchen, followed instantly by a deafening clap of thunder. Prince whinnied once more, as if approving the plan. "Take Sophia to my room," Helen instructed Maria. "It's warmer than hers, and Edward never goes there. George, you know what to do." The stable hand nodded, determined. "I'll take Stella, the bay mare. Prince is impossible today, and besides, he needs to stay here, watching over her," he finished, casting a significant look at the unconscious girl. As George disappeared into the storm and Maria carried Sophia upstairs, Helen remained in the kitchen, watching Prince through the window. The horse was calmer now, as if he understood that help was on its way. "Laura," the housekeeper whispered into the night air, "help us save your girl." Dr. Michael was about to retire for the night when he heard the urgent knocking on his door. The storm raged outside, and he wasn't expecting visitors at that hour. Upon opening the door, he found George completely soaked, his clothes dripping, onto the entryway rug. "Doctor," the stable hand panted, still catching his breath from the ride, "we need you at the Montgomery estate. It's an emergency." The veterinarian frowned, already reaching for his bag. In his early 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind round glasses, Dr. Michael bore the marks of someone who had seen much suffering, in both animals and humans. "Which of the horses?" he asked, putting on his waterproof coat. George hesitated for a moment. "Actually, Doctor, it's not exactly a horse." Dr. Michael paused, understanding instantly. In a small town, secrets travel fast, and he had already heard the whispers about Montgomery's daughter. "The girl?" he asked softly, already knowing the answer. George nodded, quickly explaining the situation. As he listened, the veterinarian's face grew increasingly serious. "I'll get my other bag," he said, disappearing for a moment into his office. When he returned, he carried 2 bags, one for veterinary work and another, older one, that he hadn't opened in years, the medical bag he had sworn never to use again after his wife's death. The ride back to the manor was difficult. Rain fell in dense sheets, and lightning briefly turned night into day. Dr. Michael noted that George had brought Stella, the most docile mare from the stable. "Prince is different," George explained, as if reading his thoughts. "He won't leave the house. It's as if he knows the girl needs him." Arriving at the manor, they entered through the back, where Helen awaited them anxiously. The housekeeper guided them upstairs, careful not to make any noise. From Edward's office, the muffled sound of classical music could be heard. In Helen's room, they found Maria sitting beside the bed, placing cold compresses on Sophia's forehead. The girl was delirious with fever, murmuring disconnected words. Dr. Michael approached immediately, his medical instincts returning as if they had never left. He examined Sophia with precise, gentle movements, his expression growing more concerned with each moment. "Pneumonia," he finally diagnosed, "and it's quite advanced." He opened his medical bag, taking out equipment he hadn't used in years. "She'll need antibiotics immediately." "The boss will never allow it," Helen warned, wringing her hands. "Then he can't know," Dr. Michael replied simply, preparing an injection. "I can't let another child die when I can do something." A loud whinny sounded from outside, making everyone startle. Dr. Michael approached the window, curious. Prince was directly below, his eyes fixed on the lit window. "Extraordinary," the veterinarian murmured. "In all my years working with animals, I've never seen behavior like this." "He protects her," Maria explained, her voice choked with emotion, "as if he knows she has no one else." Dr. Michael administered the antibiotic and left other medications, explaining in detail how to give them. "I'll be back tomorrow," he promised. "I'll tell Edward I came to check on Prince, who seems to be unwell. It won't be entirely a lie." At that moment, Sophia opened her eyes, her feverish gaze focusing on the doctor. "Prince," she whispered, "is he okay?" "Yes, little one," Dr. Michael answered softly, surprised by the strength of the connection between the girl and the animal. "He's out there, watching over you as you sleep." A faint smile lit Sophia's face before she drifted back to sleep. Dr. Michael stood up, packing his equipment. "Keep her warm and hydrated," he instructed. "And if the fever spikes, don't hesitate to call me, no matter the hour." Before leaving, the doctor paused once more by the window, observing Prince. The horse remained motionless in the rain, like a marble statue gleaming under the lightning. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "they say some animals can sense things we humans can't. They can see through the masks we wear, perceive people's true nature." Helen and Maria exchanged significant looks, while George nodded silently. Everyone. They knew that something extraordinary was happening at Rosewood Manor, something beyond human comprehension. The storm continued its nightly symphony, but now, for the first time in a long while, there was a thread of hope hanging in the air, a hope that took the form of a white horse and the heart of a small, feverish girl. The morning arrived grey and damp at Rosewood Manor. The storm had subsided to a persistent drizzle, leaving behind a trail of fallen branches and mirrored puddles in the gardens. Edward Montgomery awoke with a throbbing headache, the result of the previous night's whiskey. As he left his room, he noticed something different in the air. The usual silence of the manor was altered, as if an invisible current of tension ran through the corridors. Normally, by this hour, he should have heard the sound of Sophia's broom against the floor or the clinking of the bucket she carried. "Helen!" he called, his voice echoing off the walls. There was no immediate response, which was unusual. The housekeeper was always nearby in the early morning hours. Edward descended the stairs, his mood worsening with each step. In the living room, he found Maria cleaning the furniture, a task that should have been Sophia's. "Where is my daughter?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Maria hesitated for a crucial moment before answering. She's not feeling well, sir." "Not feeling well?" Edward repeated disdainfully. "Since when is that an excuse not to work? Where is she?" At that moment, a familiar whinny sounded from outside. Edward approached the window and saw Prince, still in the same spot where he had been all night, his white coat stained with mud. And what is that animal still doing there? George, he bellowed, his voice thundering through the manor. The stable. Anne appeared quickly, looking nervous. Yes, sir. Why isn't Prince in the stable? And why is he caked in mud like some common nag? He's agitated, sir. I couldn't get him to go in. Dr. Michael even came to examine him last night. What? Edward interrupted sharply. Who authorized calling the vet? The sound of coughing from upstairs caught his attention. Edward narrowed his eyes, recognizing the direction, the hallway, of the staff quarters. He climbed the stairs rapidly, ignoring Maria and George's protests. In the hallway, he found Helen exiting her own room, trying to close the door silently. Get out of the way, he ordered. Mr. Montgomery, Helen tried. To argue, please. Edward pushed her aside and opened the door. The scene he found made his blood boil. Sophia was lying in Helen's bed, covered by several blankets, with compresses on her forehead and medications on the nightstand. What is the meaning of this? He roared, striding into the room. Sophia woke with a start, trying to sit up in bed. Her face was flushed with fever, and the cough shook her fragile body. She's very ill, Helen explained, placing herself between Edward and the bed. Dr. Michael diagnosed pneumonia. She needs care or... Dr. Michael? Edward cut in, his voice dangerously low. The vet? He was a physician before, Maria intervened from the doorway. He knows what he's doing. Edward fell silent for a moment, his face growing redder by the second. All of you, conspiring behind my back? He turned to Sophia. And you, ungrateful child, thinking you can shirk your duties. At that instant, a deafening crash came from outside. Everyone rushed to the window in time to see Prince rearing up and striking the mansion wall with his hooves, directly below the room. This animal has gone mad, Edward declared. George, call the butcher. I'm getting rid of him today. No, Sophia cried out, her voice hoarse from illness. It was the first time she had directly confronted her father. The sound of the slap echoed through the room. Helen and Maria gasped in horror as Sophia fell back onto the bed, a red mark on her pale face. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Prince, as if sensing the assault, let out a furious whinny and, taking a run-up, hurled himself against the mansion wall with all his might. The impact was so violent that cracks appeared in the plaster and the very floor of the room trembled. He's going to bring the wall down, George exclaimed, incredulous. Edward spun on his heels, marching out of the room. That's it. I'm putting an end to this now. But before he reached the staircase, another sound filled the manor. Sirens. Through the hallway window, they could see a police car and another from Child Protective Services turning through the property gates. Helen lifted her chin, meeting Edward's furious gaze. I called them, she declared. I couldn't be an accomplice to this any longer. Outside, Prince finally calmed down, as if satisfied with the arrival of help. The rain began to fall again, washing the mud from his white coat, while the sirens painted Rosewood Manor in shades of red and blue. The rain fell softly on the official cars parked in front of Rosewood Manor. Inside the living room, the tension was palpable. Edward Montgomery sat in his favorite armchair, maintaining an appearance of calm that contrasted with the fury in his eyes. Opposite him, the social worker, Miss Beatrice Scott, took notes on her clipboard as she listened to Helen's testimony. The girl has been working since she could walk, the housekeeper reported, her voice firm despite her fear. Cleaning, scrubbing, carrying buckets far too heavy for her age. Even when sick, she's forced to continue. This is absurd, Edward interrupted, rising. I am merely teaching my daughter discipline. How I raise my own child is my business. With all due respect, Mr. Montgomery, Ms. Scott replied calmly, child labor and medical neglect are matters for the state, especially considering the severity of her current situation. Upstairs, Dr. Michael was examining Sophia again, now with a doctor from the local health clinic present. Maria remained by the bed, holding the girl's hand, while 2 police officers stood guard at the bedroom door. Outside, Prince continued his silent vigil, now accompanied by George, who was trying to soothe the animal. The horse had been calmer since the authorities arrived, but still kept his eyes fixed on the window of the room where Sophia lay. "And what about the child's mother?" Miss Scott asked, flipping through her notes. A heavy silence fell over the room. It was Maria, who had just come downstairs, who answered. "Laura was one of the maids at the manor. Mr. Montgomery. He let her die, denied her medical treatment when she fell ill." "That's slander," Edward protested, but his voice trembled slightly. "We have witnesses," Helen added. "All the former staff, remember, and now he was doing the same to Sophia." Miss Scott made a few more notes before standing up. "Mr. Montgomery, given the gravity of the accusations and the child's state of health, Sophia will be temporarily removed from your custody to receive adequate medical treatment." "You can't do this," Edward exploded, advancing towards the social worker. The police officers present in the room immediately stepped between them. At that moment, Dr. Michael came down the stairs, his face grave. "The girl needs to be hospitalized immediately. The pneumonia is in an advanced state, and she shows signs of malnutrition and exhaustion." "And where do you intend to take her?" Edward asked, his tone threatening. "To my home," Dr. Michael answered firmly. "I have adequate medical facilities there, and my daughter Claire is a nurse. Later, when she's stronger, she will be transferred to the city hospital." A sharp whinny cut the air, followed by the sound of hooves. Everyone rushed to the window in time to see Prince rearing up, as if approving the decision. "This animal also needs to be evaluated," Dr. Michael continued. "His behavior is extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it in all my years of veterinary practice." "Prince is my property," Edward snarled, "just like this house and everything in it." "Sophia is not property," Miss Scott interjected, her voice sharp. "She is a child who needs protection, and the state will ensure she receives it." Outside, an ambulance had just arrived. Paramedics ascended the stairs with a stretcher, and soon Sophia was being carefully transported out of the manor. Her face was pale, but a shadow of a smile appeared when she saw Prince. The horse accompanied the stretcher to the ambulance, his hooves marking a gentle rhythm on the wet earth. When they tried to lead him away, he resisted, whinnied, and remained by the vehicle's side. "Let him accompany her," Dr. Michael suggested. "My property has enough space, and there is clearly a special bond between them." "This is theft," Edward shouted, advancing towards the door. "I'll sue all of you. You will have your chance to defend yourself in court, sir," one of the police officers informed him. "For now, I suggest you remain at the manor. We have many questions about Laura Montgomery's death as well." Helen and Maria watched the scene from the porch, silent tears streaming down their faces. Years of fear and silence were finally coming to an end. George had already saddled Stella to accompany the ambulance to Dr. Michael's house, carrying a small bag with Sophia's few clothes. "Laura can rest in peace now," Maria whispered, squeezing Helen's hand. "Her little girl is safe." The ambulance departed slowly down the dirt path, followed by Prince, who maintained a steady, determined pace. The rain had ceased, and a faint ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, as if heaven itself were blessing this moment of liberation. Dr. Michael's home was known in town as the Yellow House, not just for its cheerful color, but for the warmth it radiated. Situated on a small property on the outskirts of town, it was a welcoming place, with a large green pasture and a small, well-kept stable. Claire, the veterinarian's daughter, had prepared the guest room meticulously. At 25, she combined the professional competence of a nurse with a natural sweetness that reminded many of her late mother. When the ambulance arrived, she was already at the door, ready to receive Sophia. "Everything's going to be all right, little one," she whispered, as she helped transfer the girl to a soft bed with clean lavender-scented sheets. "You're safe here." Outside, Prince refused to enter the stable, preferring to remain near the window of the room where Sophia rested. Dr. Michael observed the animal's behavior with growing fascination. "In all my years of practice," he commented to Claire, "I've never seen such a profound connection between an animal and a human. It's as if he knows exactly what she needs." The night passed with Claire and Dr. Michael taking turns caring for Sophia. Her fever was still high, but the antibiotics were beginning to take effect. Every hour, they could hear Prince whinnying softly, as if checking if everything was all right. In the morning, Sophia opened her eyes, initially confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. The room was bright and welcoming, decorated with floral curtains and a small bookshelf with children's books. On the nightstand, there was a glass of fresh water and a vase of freshly picked daisies. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Claire smiled, entering the room with a tray. "I brought your breakfast. Do you think you can eat a little?" Sophia looked at the tray with wide eyes. There was oatmeal with honey, fresh fruit cut into small pieces, and a glass of orange juice. She had never had breakfast in bed before. Do I need to clean something in return?" she asked timidly. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes gentle but firm. "No, dear. Here you don't need to clean anything. Your only job is to rest and get well." A familiar whinny made Sophia turn to the window. Prince was there, his head appearing over the sill, his attentive eyes fixed on her. For the first time in days, a genuine smile lit up the girl's face. "He hasn't left there all night," Claire explained, helping Sophia sit up. "Dad says he's never seen such a devoted horse." Dr. Michael entered the room at that moment, carrying his medical bag. "How is our patient today?" he asked cheerfully, though his experienced eyes were already assessing the girl's color and disposition. "Can Prince stay?" Sophia asked anxiously, before the doctor could even examine her. "Of course he can." Dr. Michael smiled, sitting down to examine her lungs. "In fact, I think it would be impossible to send him away. He's chosen to be your guardian." While the doctor performed the checkup, Claire opened the curtains wider, letting the morning light flood in. Sophia could then see the extent of the property, the green pasture, the flowering trees, and a small lake further in the distance. It was like a completely different world from the gloomy manor where she had lived her entire life. "Well, look at this," Dr. Michael commented, satisfied after the exam. "The fever has already come down a bit, and your breathing is less congested. The medicine is working." "And when do I have to go back?" Sophia asked in a low voice, fear evident in her words. Claire and Dr. Michael exchanged a significant look before he answered, "You're not going back, Sophia. The social worker, Ms. Scott, has ensured that you'll stay here until you're completely recovered. Then we'll figure out together what will be the best place for you." The words seemed surreal to Sophia. Not going back, no more waking before sunrise to clean the manor, no more punishments in the dark room. As if sensing her confusion, Prince whinnied softly, stretching his neck into the room. Claire approached the window and gently petted the animal's muzzle. "You know," she said, turning back to Sophia, "they say horses can see into people's souls. I think Prince saw something very special in you, something perhaps even you don't know you have yet." Sophia reached her hand towards the window, and Prince immediately stretched his neck to reach her. The touch of his soft muzzle was like a silent promise. The days of suffering were behind her. "Now," Claire smiled, fluffing the pillows, "how about we explore some stories?" She reached for a colorful book from the shelf. "This was my favorite when I was your age." For the first time in her short life, Sophia was experiencing what it was like to be truly cared for. Outside, Prince finally moved away from the window, grazing peacefully under the morning sun, as if he knew his charge was, at last, in good hands. While Sophia regained her strength at the Yellow House, the entire town buzzed with the events unfolding at Rosewood Manor. The police had cordoned off the property with yellow tape, and patrol cars were constantly arriving and departing, carrying documents and evidence. Helen and Maria had been called in to give further statements, this time regarding Laura's death. George also contributed, revealing years of silent observations about the mistreatment of not only Sophia, but also her late mother. At the Yellow House, the morning began with a special discovery. Claire had found an old box in the attic containing photographs from when her father was still a doctor in Chicago. Among them, one particularly caught her eye. A young, smiling nurse standing beside her own mother at the hospital where they both worked. "Dad!" she called, coming downstairs with the photograph in her hands. "Look at this!" Dr. Michael adjusted, his glasses examining the image. His face paled slightly. "Laura," he murmured. "It can't be." "Sophia's mother?" Claire asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes. She did her residency at the same hospital as your mother before she moved here. She was a brilliant, dedicated nurse." His voice trailed off. If I had recognized the name when I moved to this town." In her room, Sophia was having her first session of respiratory physiotherapy, recommended by the local clinic doctor. Through the open window, she could hear Prince grazing peacefully, his bell tinkling softly in the morning breeze. "Breathe slowly," the physiotherapist instructed gently, "like the movement of the ocean waves." Sophia had never seen the ocean, but she imagined it through the stories Claire had begun to read to her. Each day brought a new discovery: the taste of hot chocolate on cold mornings, the pleasure of drawing with new colored pencils, the comfort of a warm hug before bed. Dr. Michael entered the room after the session, carrying the photograph. His expression was gentle, but his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Sophia," he called softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Would you like to see something special?" The girl looked curiously at the photograph he held out to her. Her eyes widened as she recognized the young, smiling face of her mother. "Mommy," she whispered, touching the image with trembling fingers. "Your mother was an extraordinary nurse," Dr. Michael explained, his voice gentle. "She worked with my wife in Chicago, saving lives, caring for people. Exactly how you deserve to be cared, for now." Sophia hugged the photograph to her chest, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Outside, Prince whinnied softly, as if sharing in that emotional moment. "Fate has mysterious ways of working," Dr. Michael continued. "Perhaps it's no coincidence that you ended up right here, where your mother has a history." Claire, who had been watching from the doorway, approached with a carved wooden box. "I found this too," she said, opening the lid. Inside was an old stethoscope and a small diary. "It was hers," Dr. Michael confirmed, recognizing the delicate handwriting on the yellowed pages. Laura always wrote about her patients, about her dreams. The sound of hooves drawing nearer caught everyone's attention. Prince had moved closer to the window, his muzzle gently nudging the lace curtains. "You know," Claire smiled, "they say that when special people pass on, they find ways to continue protecting those they love. Sometimes through angels, other times through white horses." Sophia looked at Prince, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. Was it possible that her mother somehow had sent this special protector? The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Ms. Scott. The social worker brought important news from the investigation. "We found Laura's will," she announced after the proper greetings. Edward had kept it hidden. In it, she not only legally recognizes Sophia as Montgomery's daughter, but also leaves her share of the family inheritance to the girl. "What inheritance?" Dr. Michael asked, surprised. "Laura came from a traditional family in Chicago," Ms. Scott explained. "When she fell in love with Edward and decided to follow him, she gave up everything. But she never renounced her share of her parents' inheritance, which she left in her will to Sophia. The revelation hung in the air, like the final piece fitting into a complex puzzle. Laura had not only protected her daughter through legal documents, but had also ensured her financial future. She thought of everything, Claire murmured, awestruck. Sophia looked from the photograph to Prince, her small heart overflowing with emotions she could barely comprehend. For the first time, she felt she had a story, an origin, a family, not just of blood but of heart. Outside, the morning sun bathed the yellow house in golden light, while Prince stood his faithful guard, like a guardian sent by a love that transcended time and death itself. The news about Laura's will spread quickly through the small town. Rosewood Manor, once a symbol of Edward Montgomery's untouchable power, was now surrounded by police and investigators. Reporters from the local newspaper clustered at the gates, eager for any information about the case that was shocking the community. Edward remained locked in his office, drinking more and more, while his lawyers desperately tried to find legal loopholes to protect him. The evidence, however, was accumulating like an unstoppable avalanche. Helen and Maria had given the police an old diary, hidden for years in the kitchen. In it, they had secretly recorded every incident of abuse against Sophia and before her against Laura. George contributed with photos he had discreetly taken over the years, showing little Sophia performing heavy labor even when sick. At the Yellow House, oblivious to the storm brewing around her father, Sophia was beginning to blossom under the care of her new protectors. Her cough gradually subsided, and healthy color returned to her face. Each day brought a new discovery, a new joy denied for so long. "Look!" Claire exclaimed that morning, entering the room with a colorful box. "I found my old dolls. Want to play with me?" Sophia looked in awe at the cloth dolls, touching them with hesitant fingers as if they were precious treasures. I can?" "Of course you can, sweetie." Claire smiled, sitting on the rug beside the bed. "And later, if you're feeling strong enough, we can take a little walk in the garden. Prince is anxious for some up-close affection." As if he had heard his name, the horse whinnied softly from outside. In recent days, he had finally agreed to sleep in the stable, but spent every free moment near Sophia's window. Dr. Michael entered the room, carrying not his medical bag, but an old photo album. "I found more pictures of your mother," he announced, his eyes shining, "including some from the day she graduated from nursing school. She was top of her class." While Sophia and Claire explored the photographs, Ms. Scott arrived for her daily visit. Her usually serene face bore an expression of restrained triumph. "The judge issued the order," she announced without preamble. "Edward Montgomery is officially prohibited from approaching Sophia. And there's more. Based on the new evidence regarding Laura's death, he is being investigated for criminal neglect." Dr. Michael nodded gravely. "And what about the inheritance?" "The will is valid and irrefutable," Ms. Scott confirmed. "Sophia is the legal heiress not only to her mother's fortune, but is also entitled to half of Edward's assets as his legitimate daughter. The judge has appointed a financial guardian to manage everything until she reaches the age of majority." Claire, who was playing with Sophia on the rug, watched the girl absorbed in combing the yarn hair of a doll. It was striking how oblivious she seemed to material matters, even now that she was discovered to be the heiress to a considerable fortune. "And what about custody?" Dr. Michael asked quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment of innocence unfolding. On the rug, Mrs. Scott smiled, for the first time letting a more personal emotion show. "Well, as for that, I have a proposal to make." Before she could continue, Prince's agitated whinny caught everyone's attention. The horse was particularly restless, pawing the ground rhythmically. What is it, buddy? Claire approached the window, concerned. The answer came in the form of distant sirens. Dr. Michael rushed to the porch and returned with surprising news. Edward Montgomery had tried to flee the manor during the night, taking documents and money. The police had intercepted him on the highway, heading towards the state capital. How did Prince know? Sophia asked, her wide eyes fixed on the horse. Some animals have a special gift, Dr. Michael explained gently. They can sense things we humans can't perceive. Prince has been your guardian angel from the beginning, hasn't he? Sophia rose from the rug and, for the first time since arriving at the Yellow House, walked to the window by herself. Prince immediately brought his muzzle close, gently touching her outstretched hand. He reminds me of Mommy, she said softly. When I'm with him, I feel like she's hugging me. Claire and Dr. Michael exchanged emotional glances, while Ms. Scott discreetly wiped away a tear. The bond between the girl and the horse was something that transcended normal understanding, as if truly guided by a higher power. Sophia, Miss Scott called gently, how about we talk about your future? I have some ideas I think you'll like. The girl turned to the social worker, still stroking Prince's muzzle. The morning sun streamed through the window, enveloping her in a golden halo, like a promise that the darkest days were definitively behind her. The scent of roses from the yellow house garden filled Dr. Michael's office that special afternoon. Sophia sat in a soft armchair, her little legs dangling, not quite reaching the floor, while Miss Scott carefully explained the plans for her future. Claire held her hand, offering silent support, and Dr. Michael watched the scene with attentive eyes and an anxious heart. Sophia, Ms. Scott began in a gentle voice, you know you can't go back to the manor, right? The girl nodded, unconsciously squeezing Claire's hand. So, we need to decide where you're going to live now, and we have some very special options to consider. Through the open window, they could hear Prince's soft whinny as he grazed peacefully in the garden, never too far from Sophia. Actually, the social worker continued, exchanging a significant look with Dr. Michael. We have a very special proposal for you. Dr. Michael and Claire would like to know if you would accept becoming part of their family permanently. Sophia's eyes widened, darting between Dr. Michael and Claire, as if trying to understand the meaning of those words. That means, Claire explained gently, you would be my little sister. You would live here with us forever, not just as a guest, but as part of the family. And Prince? Sophia asked in a whisper. Dr. Michael smiled, moved by the girl's concern for her protector. Prince is already part of the family too. I have papers here that officially transfer his ownership to you. He'll never have to go back to the manor again. Sophia was silent for a moment, processing all this information. Her life had changed so drastically in the past few weeks that it sometimes felt like a dream. But there's one more thing, Miss Scott added. Remember the inheritance your mother left you? Well, we've decided to use part of it for a very special project. Claire stood up and picked up a folder with sketches and blueprints. We want to transform Rosewood Manor into a home for children who need help, just like you did. A place where they can feel safe and loved. And do you know what it will be called? Dr. Michael asked softly. Laura House, in honor of your mother. It will be a place where her spirit of care and love will live on, helping other children. Tears began to stream silently down Sophia's face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of an emotion too deep for her little heart to contain. And there's one more surprise, Claire smiled, picking up another envelope. Remember how you said you'd never seen the ocean? Well, as soon as you're completely recovered, we're going on a family trip. You, me, our dad, and yes, we found a place at the beach where Prince can join us. A louder whinny sounded from the garden, as if the horse approved of the plan. Everyone laughed, the tension of the moment dissolving. "So, Sophia," Miss Scott asked gently, "what do you think of all these changes?" The girl looked out the window, where Prince was now approaching, his white coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Then her eyes scanned Dr. Michael's kind face, Claire's loving smile, and finally rested on the photograph of her mother that now held a place of honor on the office wall. Her voice trembled slightly. "Can I call you Dad and Sister?" Claire couldn't hold back her tears, hugging Sophia with all the love she had stored in her heart since the little girl had arrived at the Yellow House. Dr. Michael joined the hug, his glasses fogged with emotion. Ms. Scott watched the scene with professional satisfaction and personal joy. In her years of work, few cases had touched her heart like Sophia's. "I think we have our answer," she smiled, beginning to organize. The adoption papers. Prince whinnied again, this time more softly, almost like a lullaby. The afternoon sun created a rainbow through her joyful tears that still wet the window pane, as if nature itself were celebrating that moment. "Family," Sophia whispered, testing the word, feeling its sweet taste. "My family." And in that moment, at the Yellow House, under the protective gaze of a white horse and the gentle spirit of a mother who never stopped loving her daughter, a new chapter began to be written. A chapter of love, healing, and second chances, proving that sometimes happy endings aren't just the stuff of fairy tales. 6 months had passed since that special afternoon in the office at the Yellow House. Rosewood Manor was unrecognizable. The shadows that once dominated its hallways had given way to light, pouring abundantly through windows, now always open. The walls, once dark, now shone with cheerful colors, decorated with children's drawings and smiling photographs. Sophia, now fully recovered and blossoming under the love of her new family, actively participated in the transformation of the place that had once been her prison. She was helping to decorate what would be the girls' room at Laura House. But this time, it was different. She did it by choice, with joy, her small hands painting colorful butterflies on the walls. "Look, Claire," she called enthusiastically, showing off a particularly beautiful butterfly she had just painted. "This one is blue, like the ocean sky." Claire smiled, remembering the recent family trip to the beach. Sophia had been enchanted by the ocean, and Prince, surprisingly, had loved strolling on the sand at sunset. "It's beautiful, my little artist," she praised, adjusting the braid in her younger sister's hair. Sophia's hair, once always unkempt, now shone healthily, adorned with colorful ribbons she loved to wear. Helen and Maria, who had decided to continue working at the transformed manor, cheerfully organized what would be the new kitchen at Laura House. The aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air, mingling with the smell of fresh paint and flowers from the garden. "Who would have thought," Maria commented, wiping her hands on her apron, "that this place would one day be so full of life?" George, who was now in charge of the institution's stables, entered carrying a bale of fresh hay. "The construction workers finished renovating the barn," he announced. "Soon we can bring in more horses for the children's therapy." The idea of using horses as part of the children's healing process had come from Dr. Michael. Inspired by the special connection between Sophia and Prince, he had developed an equine therapy program that would be an integral part of Laura House's work. "Sophia," Claire called, "want to go see how Prince is doing? He's been very interested in the work on the new stable." The two went out into the garden, where the late afternoon sun gilded the treetops. Prince grazed peacefully near the rose bushes that had been replanted. No longer the dark red roses Edward preferred, but a colorful variety that included the pink roses that had been Laura's favorites. "Hello, friend," Sophia whispered, approaching the horse. Prince immediately lifted his head, his gentle eyes fixed on her with the same protective love as always. Dr. Michael, who was supervising the installation of new physiotherapy equipment, paused to watch the scene. It still amazed him how the horse, once known for his difficult temperament with Edward, transformed completely in Sophia's presence. "Dad!" Claire called, waving for him to come closer. "Show Sophia the surprise that arrived. Today." The veterinarian smiled, taking a small, shiny object from his pocket. It was a golden plaque, beautifully engraved. Laura House, Home and Children's Rehabilitation Center, where every child is a treasure to be protected. Sophia's eyes shone as she read the words. "Is it like Mommy used to say?" she asked, recalling the stories Claire and Dr. Michael had shared about Laura. "Exactly as she said," Dr. Michael confirmed, his voice gentle. "We found that phrase in her diary. It was what she believed, and it's what we're going to do here." Prince approached, his muzzle gently touching the plaque as if giving his approval. The setting sun created a golden halo around his white mane, reminding everyone of the magical moments that had led them there. "The first children arrive next week," Claire commented, putting her arm around her sister's shoulders. "Are you excited to make new friends?" Sophia nodded, though a shadow of concern crossed her face. "Will they be scared at first, like I was?" "Probably," Dr. Michael answered honestly. "But that's why you're here. You can show them that it's possible to find joy again, that there are people and even special horses ready to help." As if understanding his part in this mission, Prince whinnied softly. Sophia smiled, stroking his strong neck. "You know," Claire said thoughtfully, "sometimes I think it wasn't by chance that Prince chose to protect you. Maybe your mother sent him, knowing that one day you would help other children find their own path to healing." Sophia hugged Prince's neck, feeling the comforting warmth of his soft fur. On the horizon, the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, the same colors that now decorated the rooms of Laura House. "Mommy would be happy," she whispered, more to herself than to the others, and everyone who heard her knew she was right. The transformation was almost complete. What had once been a place of shadows and fear was becoming a beacon of hope and love, proving that sometimes the greatest changes begin with the brave heart of a little girl and the unconditional loyalty of a white horse. The day of Laura House's inauguration dawned with a perfectly blue sky, as if the universe itself were smiling on the occasion. The rose bushes in the garden were in full bloom, creating a multicolored carpet that stretched as far as the eye could see. In the new stable, freshly painted white with sky blue trim, Prince waited eagerly alongside 3 other horses carefully selected for the equine therapy program. Sophia, wearing a light blue dress and a matching ribbon in her hair, stood with glare at the main entrance, welcoming the first children to arrive. Her heart beat fast, a mixture of anxiety and joy as she saw the small faces that, like hers not long ago, bore the marks of past sorrows. "Welcome to Laura House," she said, softly to a particularly shy girl who was hiding behind the social worker. "Would you like to meet the horses?" The girl, who couldn't have been more than 6, looked up with interest. Sophia extended her hand, remembering how she herself had needed kindness and patience to learn to trust again. "My special friend is named Prince," she continued, guiding the girl towards the stable. "He helped me when I was sad, and now he wants to help other children too." Dr. Michael watched the scene from the porch, his heart overflowing with pride. Beside him, Miss Scott smiled, moved by the transformation of little Sophia into a young caregiver. "It's incredible," the social worker commented, "how she connects with the children. It's as if she knows exactly what they need to hear." Helen and Maria, wearing new aprons with the Laura House logo, served hot chocolate and freshly baked cookies to the visitors. The sweet aroma mingled with the scent of roses, creating a welcoming atmosphere that made everyone feel instantly at home. George led a small group of older children on a tour of the stables, explaining how the horses would be an important part of their recovery. Prince, as always, showed a special sensitivity, gently lowering his head to allow the most frightened children to touch him. "You see," George explained, "each horse has its own personality, but they all have something in common. They know when someone needs love and protection." Claire, who had completed a special course in equine therapy, joined the group with a radiant smile. "And you know what's most amazing? Prince taught us that. He showed us that sometimes angels have 4 hooves and a white mane." The children laughed, and that sound, so rare and precious for many of them, echoed through the fields like music. Sophia felt her heart expand as she realized that this place, which had once been the scene of so much sadness, was now filled with laughter and hope. Late in the afternoon, as the sun began to set, everyone gathered in the garden for a special moment. Dr. Michael had prepared a small inauguration ceremony, attended by local officials and community families. "Laura House," he began his speech, "is born from a love story. The love of a mother for her daughter, the love of an animal for a child in danger, and the love we all discovered we are capable of giving when we open our hearts." Sophia stood beside Prince, her small hand resting on the horse's neck. Claire hugged her by the shoulders, and together they watched the sky turn pink and gold. "Look!" one of the children pointed suddenly. A perfect rainbow had formed over the property, even though it hadn't rained. Its vibrant colors seemed to touch the 2 most significant points of the place: the new Laura House sign and the stable where Prince now lived. "It's a sign," Sophia whispered, and everyone who heard her felt the truth in her words. "Mommy is happy." Prince whinnied softly, as if in agreement. The wind blew gently, carrying rose petals that danced in the air like tiny, colored stars. Dr. Michael raised his glass of juice, proposing a toast to Laura, whose light continues to shine through love; to Sophia, who taught us that courage sometimes comes in small packages; and to Prince, who showed us that miracles happen every day if we have eyes to see and hearts to believe. The glasses clinked, reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of Claire's hug, the protective presence of Prince, and something more, a soft, fragrant sensation, like the gentle touch of a hand on her hair. "Thank you, Mommy," she murmured into the wind. And so, as night gently descended upon Laura House, a new story began. A story of healing, second chances, and unconditional love. A story that proved that even in the darkest nights, there is always a white horse guarding our dreams and a brighter dawn awaiting us just beyond the horizon.